week or so, we've had some great doctors on. Dr. Asim Malhotra was talking about after social distancing, washing your hands, the next best thing you can do is eat real food and get on a weight loss program if you're overweight. And then we had Patrick Holford saying pretty much the same thing. And then we had Dr. Malcolm Kendrick saying pretty much the same thing. And Dr. Dan Mag saying pretty much the same thing. And basically saying that after social distancing and washing your hands, the next best thing to do if you're overweight is start to lose your weight. And lo and behold, the research has just come out. And what does it say? Well, it says simply this, that if you're in your older years, you've got to be very, very, very careful. But also then in the under 50s, the single biggest cause of problems and real problems with COVID, like serious side effects and even death, is being overweight. So it's out there, it's in the news, it's in the newspapers. You can't hear me? Shall I keep on talking? Am I live or? Well, we're just checking. Have no sound. You're right, Jack. No sound as of yet. Why have we got no sound? Let me just check I'm not on mute, Jack. But I can't be on mute. So I turn my mic off and back on. Changed anything here? Have we still in camera there? Well, talk of conspiracy theories. Goodness gracious me. We've had problems this morning for the first time ever, and we think we've now fixed them. If you're watching, let us know if you can hear me right now, because if you can, then we are good to rock and roll. What I was saying earlier on was simply this. At the moment, after social distancing and washing our hands, we've been saying, haven't we, for the last 3 weeks on this program, that getting your metabolic syndrome under control, getting your weight down, making sure that you're doing everything you can to boost your immune system is the next best thing. We're up and running, Jack, that you can be doing. Well, lo and behold, the newspapers have started to print the same story. In fact, they're now saying there is plenty of research to suggest that those that are having serious effects of COVID, that are becoming really ill with it, and sadly those that are dying, if you're under 50, the number one cause is obesity. And we've been saying that all along. Dr Asim Malotta, Dr Malcolm Kendrick, Dr Dan Maggs, Patrick Holford, literally all the experts have been saying there is a direct correlation with metabolic syndrome and those that are really seriously suffering from COVID. So what can you do about it? Well, the first thing you can do is, even if you're morbidly obese right now, or whether you're just a little bit overweight, you start to make the change today. You say, look, if COVID comes knocking on my door, as long as I'm on that sort of direction, that upward sort of movement of getting my weight down, even if it's just coming off tiny bit by tiny bit by tiny bit, set yourself a goal of a pound or a kilo per week, but as long as you're moving in the right direction, think about it, statistically, you will be making sure that your chances of having a serious side effect or becoming very ill from COVID are reducing in line with your weight loss. Weight loss reduction is a reduction directly related to the seriousness of COVID. Now, on top of that, there's loads of myths out there about all sorts of things. And what we thought we'd do this morning is get a very, very good friend of mine on, Dr Shan Hussain. He's a brilliant doctor, he's a GP, he's also an author of The Big Prescription. And between us, we will take your questions and hear what you've been hearing in terms of myths and so on. And let's see if we can debunk them together. How are you this morning, Shan?
Good morning, Steve. I'm doing really well, thanks. How are you?
No, I can't hear Shan, Jack.
All right.
So keep talking, Shan. See, this is definitely a conspiracy, Shan, because I can't hear you. Can you hear Shan, Jack?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Steve.
1 2 1 2. Are you there, Shan?
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear you, but Jack can hear you. So just keep talking for a minute to the audience.
Okay, thanks. No pressure then. So yes, Steve, you've mentioned
I can't, Jack,
conspiracy theories, which I'm obviously very concerned about. And I'm glad to get on the show today to help to debunk a lot of these. There's some serious misinformation going on that is potentially quite harmful and serious. So thank you for having me on, and hopefully we can get through this in the time we have together.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time, mate. I know you've been doing your role as a GP and also as a father. And by the way, I think your hair's looking amazing this morning. I wish I could grow mine like yours. I think every time mine gets really long, my wife goes, right, go and get it cut. But right now, of course, the barbers are shut, and yours looks fantastic, mate.
Oh, bless you.
So, let me start with some questions that we've had for you over the last couple of days. What strategies have you adopted, Shan, to get through this time? What are your own strategies to get through? Let's just see how you're dealing with this as a GP and as a father before we start talking about the conspiracies.
Yes, well, there have been some wonderful doctors who have recently been talking about the importance of good, healthy nutrition. And I think that, who am I to disagree with them? I fully agree on the importance of eating real foods, whole foods, healthy foods will support our constitution and give us the best possible chance of fighting this off if we do, unfortunately, catch this. Just as important as that, I think, is stress factors and the need to de-stress. You know, these are very stressful times at the moment. A lot of people I'm meeting are reporting feeling increasingly tired for some reason. Not really sure why, but they just feel sometimes exhausted and sleeping more, or sometimes struggling to sleep. And that is as a result of all the stress we're experiencing at the moment, I believe. I think that's playing a significant part in it. So de-stressing is a key element here. And obviously resting up, good hydration, healthy activity. Social interactions are really important. We talked last time about, social distancing and social isolation. And I think we need to call that what it is, which is physical distancing. We can still be social as we are being right now. And I think that's really important. I had a catch up with some friends from medical school over Zoom the other day, and I'd say afterwards, I just felt wonderful. It was really, really good to experience that social connection with some of my oldest and dearest friends. And there's no pill in the world that can do that for us from what that does to our constitution. And finally, avoiding too much media. There's so much nonsense out there right now, particularly on social media, where literally anyone can post anything. And we've really got to make sure that we're not engaging in too much nonsense out there that is stoking our fears, which are already heightened.
Absolutely. One of the things we've been doing as a family, Zoom is, thank goodness Zoom is there, we've been all buying as a family the same, most of us got the same board games, and we've been playing board games remotely against each other over social media. We've been having loads of fun, which is really, really interesting. Now, let's get straight in then to debunking some myths right now. What are your views, Dr. Shan, about wearing a face mask?
Okay, great question. So yes, I'm seeing a lot of people out there wearing face masks when they're out and about. There's mixed evidence as to how effective it can really be in the community. Certainly, obviously, in the hospital environment, there is clear evidence and importance around using it. But I think what's more important than face mask is keeping that safe physical distancing and avoiding physical touch. I take my son for a walk some days down to our local grocery store, and I always say, okay, you wait outside and don't touch anything and don't go too close to anyone. And he does. And I think that's probably more important than wearing the face mask. Obviously if you're going to be within 2 meters of someone, which we really shouldn't be, then that's when the transference can happen from a respiratory point of view, being more likely. So yes, I would say focus more on the physical distancing and worry less about the face mask until we have more compelling evidence around it in the community.
And definitely, with the face mask, of course, if you've had it or you've still got it, well, you shouldn't be out. But if you were to be out, then maybe you're the person that definitely should be wearing the face mask. But if you're feeling fine yourself, it seems to be offering, as far as I can see in all the research I've been looking at, very little protection. The best thing is just keep your distance, is it not?
Absolutely, yes. I very much agree.
And let's, if we do need them, let's save them for our brilliant care workers and doctors and nurses and so on. Washing hands, does it have to be all that chemically nasty sometimes? Cleansers that kills everything 99.99% dead, because it kills 99.99% dead of bacteria, because the virus isn't bacterial. And because lots of people complaining their hands at the moment are just wrecked from all this bacterial washing, is soap and water just as good?
Yes, soap and water is fine. I think there's so many different brands out there. Someone ridiculously priced, claiming to kill 99.999% of all germs. And okay, if they say so, but soap and water is absolutely fine. Very underrated in these situations. So I would say that would be the minimum people should use. And yes, regular hand washing is a key part of preventing the spread of this, without a doubt.
Yeah, I always say that part of optimal nutrition is, trying to avoid toxins and chemicals and everything. And I always say, don't put on your skin what you wouldn't be prepared when you look at the ingredients to digest, because it could be doing damage. So let's not do damage. Keep washing with soap and water, because remember, this is a virus and it is not a bacteria. How is living in these lockdown conditions going to shape us? And the question was a two-part question from one of our lovely viewers. How's it going to shape us in a negative way, and then what in a positive way? So what's your view on, we've all been locked down for a while. What are the negatives, but are there some positives too?
Well, I'll talk about the negatives first, and then we can really get into the positives, because that's what I really want to jump into. But from a negative point of view, yes, undoubtedly, there is a risk of reduced social interaction, and social interaction is really important to help us get through our day-to-day living, and it's a key part of our health, having good social context. There's obviously what we're seeing right now with the economic and the business fallout, which I'm not really qualified to talk about, but we are certainly seeing that. I think I'll just stay in my lane on that one. But yes, that is certainly a negative there. And the main thing that I'm concerned about is stress, and the stress factors that can be the determinant of many health conditions, very real health conditions. Stress can drive so many unhealthy behaviors, from a dietary point of view, from a sedentary point of view, from some of the decisions we make. And we do need to look at regular ways to de-stress and relax. And I'm really happy to see some of the positive news that's come out in the last week about the importance of eating whole foods at these times. And I think probably as important is to talk about the importance of de-stressing at these times, making sure that we are regularly relaxing. Okay, so let's talk about the positives, because I like to be on a positive note. I think one of the big things is the recognition of our key workers and the hard work they do. Nurses, delivery drivers, grocery stores, and some of the absolutely essential work that they do. Teachers, I must mention as well. And my son's upstairs right now doing a virtual school lesson, and it's wonderful to recognize the selfless work that many of these individuals do for our communities to help support us. And I'm really happy to see that is getting the attention it deserves. And from a National Health Service point of view, I have noticed, and this has been a huge plus from my perspective, is that there's been a lot less bureaucratic intervention from appraisers and draconian regulators and politicians telling us how to practice medicine, which I've always found somewhat infuriating over the years. We're now being free to do our jobs the way we see fit, and putting our patients first. Instead of tick box exercises that have distracted us from patient care over the years, undoubtedly. So yes, they will be the main positives, and hopefully many of them will stay. Hopefully we'll continue to recognise and value the wonderful work our nurses do, our grocery stores do, our delivery workers, our teachers. And we'll have a lot less meddling within our National Health Service to help support our patients.
Shan, for me, that's such an important thing that you've just said there. A quick story. When I sold my company in 2006, the people that bought it changed everything, and they wouldn't let the people that produced the shows make decisions. Everything was done by sheet, and tick this, and why did you do this, and tick that. And the company went downhill, and we bought it back. And the first thing we did was we empowered all the managers, as we had done when the business was successful. What I totally agree with what you've just said there, that I feel so sorry for doctors, for nurses and everything, that from all the people I've interviewed, they've said over the last sort of decade or so, there's been so much red tape, so much paperwork, so much, have you done this, have you done that, that you've do more time doing paperwork than actually fixing people, which is obviously what you qualified to do, to help people. And right now, you're right, because they've lifted some of that red tape, they're having to trust all the GPs, and lo and behold, you're doing amazing things. You and the nurses, you're doing such great things that you just go, let's hope, coming out the other side, that the government don't have a short-term memory failure and go, oh, let's go back to the way it was before, because you guys are all so brilliant at what you do. And if we could just free up more time for you to be with patients and do the thing you're trained to do, rather than all this blinking bureaucracy, which causes stress for doctors, doesn't it? You were saying to me, doctors and probably nurses as well, suicide rates, heart attack rates because of all the stress. And that stress isn't stress from doing the things you're trained to do, which is looking after people. It's all that stress being buried down and pushed down on you from all this bureaucracy and red tape.
Well, if I can add something to that with a very brief story from my own experience, is that obviously, last year I had heart problems, and following my diagnosis, I was contacted by the NHS England appraisal team saying that my appraisal was due, and I requested, quite reasonably, an extension. Said, look, can I just put this off for a couple of months? I'm just recovering, just got out of hospital after a heart attack. and I just want to just have a couple of months just to take care of myself and go through my rehabilitation and my therapy because I'm not feeling 100%. And they said, no, absolutely not. You can't. You need to have your annual appraisal, and if you don't, then you can't practice. And I was just outraged. I thought, gosh, who do you think you are, and who do you think you're talking to? You know, I'm being very honest with you, and I want to, make sure that I'm fit to practice. But obviously, my health comes first.
Yeah.
And they point blank refused. But what's interesting is with what's happening at the moment, all appraisals and revalidation have been put on the back burner. So they've demonstrated that these interventions are not essential for day-to-day practice of medicine. And, hopefully they'll take a long, hard look at their conduct.
Yeah, that's just, And I mean, just for those that don't know, while you were in hospital recovering from your heart attack, you found out about a friend that had died of a heart attack that was a doctor. There were other doctors that had heart attacks, and and I'm sure it's not the pressure of practicing medicine. I'm sure, well, that must be part of it, but I'm sure it must be the pressure of the bureaucracy.
I think that's certainly contributed to it, and I'm happy to go on record saying that. Probably get into trouble now, but
Well, no, because you're speaking, from personal experience, and I'm not a massive. I've got hundreds of managers and thousands of employees around the world, but I'm not a big believer in appraisals. I don't think you should wait once a year to do an appraisal. You just, if you've got great people, just as long as they're all motivated and to do what they've trained to do, then appraisals for me are massively overrated. And
the way I see it is,
I'll put that on the record as well in case any of my employees are watching.
The way I see it is I'm being appraised every single day by my patients.
Exactly.
And that's the appraisals that really count as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. Right, next question. We've got so many here. Talk about where do you go to get reliable news? So debunking some of the myths, which we're going to get onto in a minute, but where would you go to get reliable news?
Great question. Okay, so I can tell you where I wouldn't go, and that would be social media. Because some of the things we're seeing are just very, very disturbing. I think what's more important is rather than the source of the news, it's the content, and it's important to separate fact from opinion. And so, like I said, it's less about the channel. Can the information we're hearing be validated? Can it be independently assessed and deemed to be accurate? So, that they're the main things that I look at. And even on, the recognized and highly regarded news channels that we have, sometimes they do have some very strong opinion pieces, which, we need to say, well, hang on, let's just step back a little bit. This is someone's opinion. This isn't necessarily related to fact. Okay, they're trying to back up their opinion, and they deserve to be heard. Let's listen to them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that should influence our opinions. Let's focus on where the facts are and what we can do with them. But one of the things I would say, and I spoke to our mutual friend Asim Malhotra about this, is reducing news exposure is an important thing. Not to be ignorant of the news, but perhaps cut down. So, as long as we're sort of relatively up to date to the point where we can survive on a day-to-day basis, let's not be immersed by the news. I remember my mum was in hospital recently, and the TV was just stuck on BBC News all the time, 24/7, and that's literally all she had to watch because she was facing that wall for 3 weeks. And you've got to turn this off, Mum. It's not going to do you any good. 90% of this information is bad news. So, it's not going to put you in a good balance there. There's a lot of wonderful things happening every single day, even right now. You don't need to look very far. And it's important that such events do get similar amounts of attention.
You know what? You're absolutely right. And turn the news off, because sadly, and this is a global problem, bad news sells more headlines, more viewers than good news. For some reason, that's what happens. Therefore, the newspapers and the news stations focus on the bad news because that's for some reason what people like to watch more. And the reality is there are going to be some amazingly good things that come out the back end of this. Like you say, an appreciation for our care workers, appreciation for our nurses, our doctors and our frontline staff. Maybe, just maybe, we've slowed down global warming for a small period, and maybe after that we'll continue to slow down global warming if we all change. We go, actually, we didn't travel much then. Maybe we don't need to travel as much. Maybe more people will work from home. That means less cars. Less cars means less damage to the ozone and so on. Maybe with all the fast chains, food chains closed, maybe people will start to look at their diet a little bit more carefully. And with that news headline a couple of days ago that under 50s, those are having the biggest sort of side effects and sadly mortality rates are those that are obese. So everything's pointing to get your weight under control, and maybe lots more people will become fit. Maybe, and there's my little post from this morning. Maybe more people are going to start going out and walking and exercising more. So there is going to be and it isn't. I'm downplaying how bad this event is. But put that to one side. As long as you're doing your social distancing, washing your hands and eating real foods, then you're doing everything you can. Turn off the news. Focus every day on those positives.
Yes, 100% agree with everything you said there.
Thank you, my friend. I didn't even pay to say that, so thanks. Fake news, radio masts, 5G.
Gosh, where do we begin? Well, you know what? Before 5G, we had 4G. That came out in 2008. There wasn't a flu virus then, was there? Swine flu wasn't until 2010, and disappeared within a few months. And 3G was what, 2001? No,
whatever. Yeah.
I don't know. It's quite. I heard a podcast yesterday. A good friend of mine, Rob Moore, who's a business entrepreneur, interviewed a guest who talked about coronavirus and how it's impacting businesses. And he said that a lot of people are going through grief reactions, and the 5 stages of grief, denial and anger, bargaining, helplessness, and then finally acceptance. And his theory is that people who are talking about these things are really in that denial and anger phase. They're talking about, trying to say, well, it's not that, it's this. No. I want to, refuse to believe that. And, this is really annoying and it's not fair and it must be this. And people aren't thinking about that. So, yes, 5G, hydroxychloroquine, ibuprofen, Bill Gates, my goodness, some of the things they're saying about him, government control agenda and chipping and vaccines. It's just irresponsible. Some of these things that are being said are just totally out there. It's just, they can't be validated. I spoke with Dr. Sean Baker, a gentleman who I'd highly recommend you get on your show, actually.
I interviewed him 2 days ago.
Oh, wonderful. Look forward to that.
He's fantastic.
He is, isn't he? So he said something interesting to me on my show, that the only thing, science is always evolving, and we have a responsibility to evolve with it. But the only thing that trumps science is better science. And if you don't have better science to improve what we already know from a scientific viewpoint, then it's an irrelevant opinion. And none of these things can be validated. That there's nothing there that things are being said by David Icke or Dr. Shiva or Jacqueline from Facebook, and some of the comments that are being going viral at the moment is just stoking people's fears at a time of global uncertainty. And I just think that is incredibly irresponsible. We're already stressed, we're already scared, and we shouldn't allow other people to induce unnecessary fears at this time. Let's just focus on taking care of ourselves and looking after each other to the best of our abilities.
Well, let's make sure you don't get misquoted on what you just said, though, because you said the only thing that beats science, that trumps science, is science. You're not talking about Donald Trump's science there, because that could be very misconstrued, because Trump's science is probably another...
the only thing that beats science is better science.
That's the one, yeah, because Trump's science is half the problem, I think, at the moment. Some of the things that's coming out of that man's mouth are unbelievable, but there you go, let me get off that. In fact, back to that thing about that, the newspaper headlines. I found it fascinating the last couple of nights, listening to the 5 o'clock broadcast. I don't do the 10 o'clock at night because I'm trying to then, wind down, not watch any news past sort of 7 or 8 o'clock. But I do listen most nights to the 5 o'clock news. And what I find interesting is that you listen to the speakers, as in, the government and the head medical advisors and so on. And they are very much, and very hats off and respect to them at the moment, fact. And then you see the journalists asking questions, trying to draw them off fact and back onto fiction and scenarios and all that. And I think that's one of the good things that is coming out of this, is that, those that are running the country at the moment are very much basing everything off fact, which has to be a good thing.
Absolutely, yes. I think there's so much emotion out there, and that can drive a lot of feelings and opinions. But the old saying that facts don't care about your feelings does ring true, probably more than ever at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So debunking myths. Was corona made in a lab? Because people are saying there are actually patents in America for a corona type virus. And then there was some some statements of a day that there's actually patents for a vaccine already. Well, if that is the case, why haven't we got it? So I don't believe certainly that there's any patents for a vaccine already, but could it have been man-made?
I have yet to see any compelling evidence whatsoever to suggest that it could have been man-made. So yeah, let's just leave it at that, shall we?
Absolutely. Now, for everyone that's enjoying the show so far, can I just give a quick plug for my friend's book here, The Big Prescription? An amazing, amazing book talking about the 3 pillars of health, because we all focus, and my book very much focuses on sort of nutrition and physical health, but you talk about the 3 pillars of health being social well-being, which again you've mentioned several times today, physical well-being and mental well-being, and it's a great, great book for anybody to understand that it's more than just about our physical well-being. Also, give us a plug for your own podcast series, because your podcast series is absolutely brilliant.
Yes, so my podcast has been around for about 18 months now, and when it came out, it hit #1 in health. Have done almost 40 episodes, and it's doing really well. We've had Steve on the show a couple of times, and some terrific guests over the years. Professor Tim Noakes, Aseem Malhotra, Zoe Harkin, David Unwin, Sean Baker, Nina Teicholz. I could go on. Some really incredible people who are sharing scientifically proven, evidence-based information that can really help our health and well-being in a natural way. So the key is really supporting health through natural means without pills and potions.
Excellent. And actually, straight after the show, everybody that's watching, if you go down and look below on Primal Living's YouTube page, my Fat and Furious podcast series, the latest one I've just put up is the one with your dear self. And thank you for being so honest. The whole hour pretty much focuses on your journey and how somebody's super, in my mind, fit, and you're not just good looking, you're fit as well, man. Very primal, and because I know you've been working with us for years at Primal and giving us advice, and then you had a heart attack out of the blue, and you were so honest about the event, the day it happened, and then your recovery, and now what you believe caused it and what you're doing to protect yourself. That I think anybody that wants to learn more about heart disease, cardiovascular disease, from a true story perspective rather than just white papers and so on, I think the podcast we did together was a great podcast. And again, thanks for doing that and being so open.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking to you. I watched it the other day, actually, and it was really good fun watching the playback there. So yes, do check it out. It's on YouTube as well, I believe.
It is indeed. Right, shall we see what questions we got in this morning? Put my glasses on because my aging eyesight is not what it used to be. Right, quite lots and lots of people. Where do we jump in? Here we go. Right, thanks for staying with us. Right, 50% of okay, well, good point from Keto. Says 50% of NH staff are overweight. Does this include all those NH staff who've died? So Keto, it's a really, really interesting point. And first I want to say our NH staff are doing an absolutely amazing job at the moment. Everybody's doing a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant job. But you are correct, and I'm going to be interested in what Shan's got to say in a moment, but you are correct that the NHS staff overall have a higher percentage of overweight and obesity than the general public at large. And if you ask Dr Aseem Malhotra, he'll say that's because we feed them crap food in hospital, amongst other things, and probably stress as well. And you are correct that we now have a data to support the fact that overweight is one of the drivers for serious, from COVID having a real serious effect rather than, what's the word? Well, mortality rates and serious side effects as opposed to just, getting it and getting through it. So that is all factually correct. Have you got a thought on why it is that NHS staff overall are slightly higher than the average in the UK for overweight and obesity?
I'm not entirely sure of the reasons why. I don't think there's actually been sort of scientifically confirmed, but yes, certainly we do see the association. I forget the actual statistic. I think it's 2/3 of NHS staff are overweight or obese. And, maybe it's down to the accessibility of a lot of the foods we have in hospitals. Maybe it's down to stress factors. I think it's difficult for me to speculate on the possible cause, but I think what's important is we look at what we can do to help with that and how we can help bring that under control.
Yeah. One of the causes, of course, Shan, could be that they all work so ridiculously hard that they haven't got time to sit down for a proper meal with real food. And if that means just snacking on the go all the time, well, snacks tend to be very carb loaded. And we know that also there's loads of research around fast food, as in eating it quickly. So there's loads of research around the French taking time with their meals, nice glass of wine, all their friends around, taking 2 hours to consume a lovely meal. And when your body's relaxed, you absorb more of the nutrients. But when you're racing your food down, you're not getting the nutritional value. You're sort of overfed and undernourished. So it's probably an element of all those things, isn't it? Stress, overworked, access to real food, and eating on the fly all the time, on the go all the time. Great question though, Keto. Very obviously difficult subject to talk about at the moment, but a very good question indeed. Questions to everyone. What's the craziest rumour you've heard relating to COVID? What's your craziest one you've heard, do you think, out of all the ones you've already mentioned?
Wow, well, there's so much competition there. I don't know which one to go with. I think probably the craziest would be, that there's going to be a vaccine that comes out that's also going to microchip every single one of us. And I just think, oh my God. We've just got too much time in their hands right now. Lockdown is not healthy for us people. We just need to perhaps switch off some of the nonsense.
We don't need a virus to track us. Google know where we are every minute of the day anyway. There's so much data on you, me, and everybody right now that we don't need chipping on top. That'd be silly. If the masks does not protect us from others, why does it protect the NHS workers? Is it because of viral overload? That's a great question. Please explain, because it's not clear to me.
I think that's probably correct. And I would emphasize the word probably. I don't know for certain, but I think one would expect, with the amount of COVID that we have in confirmed cases in hospitals and the number of staff that are in communication with patients on a regular basis, who knows what's being picked up. There is the big concerns about lack of personal protective equipment at the moment, which I think needs to be addressed urgently. We're literally sending our doctors and nurses on the front line without protection, without adequate protection. So that may well be the case. I have to say that I can't really give a definitive answer there, though, I'm afraid. So I'll just do the best I can with that.
No, that's a good answer. We don't always know all the answers. Like the next one, we don't probably all know the answer. It says, does 5G damage our cells? I don't know about 5G, whether it's different to 4G, 3G, or whatever, but I will tell people that, and I've put it in my book, that even when you buy a mobile phone, it says be careful because of electromagnetic forces. There'll never be any research done at all, ever. And what you should do, and I encourage all my children all the time with their mobile phone, is don't have it up to your head, use it hands-free. Try and always get a good signal, because if it's a weak signal, the pulsation coming out of the phone is higher. And there's also been some research with a brain cancer. And what they couldn't work out with this research with this brain cancer, that it was nearly always, if you were left-handed, it was the left side of the brain. If you're right-handed, it was the right hand of the brain. And this explosion of this particular type of brain cancer, the only sort of logic they could draw from it was mobile phone use to the head. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that uses a mobile phone is going to get brain cancer, but this brain cancer that I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a certain type of brain cancer, is nearly always left or right, depending on where you use a mobile phone. So my advice is, we will never know about mobile phones and the damage they do to our brains, but they do have electromagnetic forces, like microwaves do, like hairdryers do, and other things. Just cut down the amount of time it's glued to your head. Would you agree or disagree with that one, Shan?
Yeah, I'd largely agree with that. I mean, the jury is out, and who knows if there's ever going to be enough evidence one way or another. But I mean, we've been talking about mobile phones since the 90s about what they can potentially do to our brains. Now, I mean, personally, when I ever use mine, I try to keep it on speakerphone rather than hold it against my ear. That's just maybe force of habit. But like you say, who really knows? I think what we've got to do is just minimize the potential risk that it could have upon us.
Thank you very much. Keto says, Jack, can you even out the audio levels? My son's working really hard in the background right now with all the technical problems we had earlier on. We'll try and do that for you. Steve Oliver says, this is a really, really good question. Do you think that maybe the situation has been exacerbated by say it again, Jack? Exacerbated. My son knows I'm dyslexic, so thank you for jumping in there. Exacerbated by numbers of people not knowing that they have underlying health issues. Wow, what a great question.
The short answer I give that is yes, almost certainly. I think people are saying that, almost trivializing the actual mortality rates that we're having, saying, well, a lot of these people already had underlying illnesses and therefore they would have died anyway, which is kind of missing the point, unfortunately, in terms of what this is actually ultimately doing. I mean, if it's COVID-19 that ultimately was the straw that broke the camel's back, then that is determined as the leading cause of death. But there's no doubt that underlying health conditions can contribute to it. Elderly, comorbidities such as heart disease, cancers, diabetes, those who are metabolically unhealthy, as Asim talked about the other day, they are at higher risk, and we've got to do what we can to minimize that risk as best as we can to support our own constitutions. And the two things that we always advise is dietary factors and stress factors. What can we do to improve each of those?
Absolutely. And one of the myths is that it was created in China. Yeah, well, we think it's a myth that it was created. What is your view, Shan, on mass testing?
I think we are certainly under testing, without a doubt. I mean, I'm working on the front line in general practice, and I haven't been offered a test yet.
Wow.
And there are a lot of doctors and nurses who could well be carrying this condition and working with other patients, and who knows how fast this is spreading. Yeah. So until we have testing, we don't really know what who's got it and who hasn't. Certainly a few of my friends who have been tested, and some of them been positive, some negative, have been following the advice and self-isolating for 14 days, and now fortunately are back at work and have been deemed fit to work. But yes, I do think we are not testing enough. They're the two criticisms I have about how things are going at the moment. Not enough testing, not enough personal protective equipment.
Absolutely. Akar has said, hi Steve, would be homebound for 30 to 60 days with all the exercise, good eating, working from home, keeping us all in good shape to restart in a few weeks. I wonder what if I have got lazy once. It's basically saying, will he get lazy once we step out? I think that's the problem with us humans. We have such a short memory of things. We must all make sure that if we're doing things for the better right now, that is something we continue to do post this event. So great comment there. Lots and lots coming in. Shan, does the current test actually test for COVID-19? Is it really 80% inaccurate? What's the point of testing if it's useless? Is that something based on some news that the test isn't that accurate? I don't know.
I believe there were some earlier tests that were dismissed because they weren't accurate enough. I'm not sure about the accuracy of the current tests, but they're deemed sufficient enough to use amongst the population. Now, they will test if someone has it. I don't think there's a test at the moment that we are using widespread that confirms if someone has had it in the past tense this time. Right. But I think that's where we are right now as of April the 21st.
Shan, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on the show. I know that you're a very, very busy GP. We take our hats off to everybody in the NHS, nurses, doctors, support staff, everybody. You're all doing a brilliant, brilliant job. And thank you today for helping us debunk some of those myths.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Pleasure to be on the show. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Gary very soon.
Gary, indeed, absolutely. Cheers, my friend. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Right. Well, talking of Gary, in a minute or so, we have Gary Lemon coming up. He works for the Trussell Trust, which is whom we're trying to raise funds for at the moment. You can donate to the Trussell Trust using the Just Giving up here, or you can make a donation via text. If you're loving these shows and you're learning lots from these brilliant doctors and nutritionists and experts that we're having on, all of whom are giving up their time completely free of charge to help spread the word about how to stay healthy in these difficult times, then they would ask you, the same as I would ask you, to make a small donation if you can to the Trussell Trust. And of course, keep dropping food off to those donation points within your local supermarkets, because more than ever, the Trussell Trust need help. The list on the screen to my right, there we go. Getting better at that. I could go and get a job at the BBC doing the weather. They need soup, they need pasta, they need tinned tomatoes and lots of other things, mainly tins. Big cry out at the moment for UHT milk, because that is one of the things they ask for, and they're struggling to get hold of it at the moment. So if you're at home right now, go in your cupboards. Have you got any UHT milk? If you have, as you go to the supermarket today, tomorrow, please go and put it into those collection boxes. Now, before we hear from Gary, one more thing. Our food fact today, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. It's kind of a food fact stroke cooking technique-y type thing. Now, I remember as a kid growing up, my grandparents always doing bone broth. We'd finish the chicken, we'd keep the bones, and we'd boil and boil and boil it, and I never quite understood why. Well, bone broth breaks down proteins and other things within the bones to such a small sort of molecule level that we absorb it. Now, collagen is something that is almost like a glue within our body. It's great for our skin, it's great for our joints, it's great for our bones. And if you can take those bones, whether it be from your chicken, whether it be from lamb or whatever you've been cooking, don't throw them away. Boil them with whatever vegetables you got left over from Sunday dinner or your evening meal. Make your own bone broth, because it will keep your skin looking young. It will keep your joints functioning and your bones too. So there's a little bit of advice. Bone broth, let's go back to the way we used to cook years and years and years ago. And do keep, by the way, your cooking suggestions coming in. Remember, we've got a competition going on with £1,000 of free jewellery as a prize, and we're asking you to go to Primal Living's Facebook page, and on there we're asking you to show us pictures of things that you've cooked for the first time during lockdown. Of course, healthy things. We don't want to know if you've made pasta or rice or bread. Not interested. We're talking about healthy things. Are you managing to change the way you approach the food at home? Right, Jack is signalling. I think, have we got Gary on the phone? We do. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Good morning. Very well, thank you.
Great stuff. Tell me what's the latest at the Trussell Trust, and tell me about demand for more people needing food, or stories of inspiration of people helping. Give us some background.
Well, I mean, to start on the obviously very serious side of things here, we're facing as a nation two crises at the moment. Obviously, we're all very focused on the health crisis of COVID-19, which we're all battling with. But alongside that, we're also facing an economic crisis. And we've seen lots of worrying figures about the number of people who are losing their jobs because of this, the number of people who are signing up to our benefit system. And what we're seeing in our food banks now is we're getting lots of them who are coming to us, who are telling us that they're seeing a big increase in demand. So we have about 1,250 food banks operating right now across the UK. And in those 1,000+ different locations, you've got all of these different sort of battles which are going on, whereby they're trying to cope with lots of new challenges thrown up by this disease. So, they're dealing with volunteers who are having to self-isolate. They're dealing with trying to keep those supplies of food going, for which, by the way, I'm extremely grateful to you and your viewers who are doing a great job. And dealing with social distancing as well at the same time. So they're having to transform the way that they operate. So, for example, lots of them now are moving to a delivery system so that we're not asking people to come directly into the food banks, which is a shame, because it's something that food banks really pride themselves on, is that kind of that personal touch. And what we used to do pre-COVID, we would offer a cup of tea and a chat, but needs must, and we have to get food out to all of these extra people. So it's a challenging time, but it's actually also quite inspirational to see the way that the food banks across the UK have been adapting to this really quickly and doing what it is that they've always told us they want to do, which is to help the people who need it most in their communities.
Yeah. One of the questions that we've had from viewers in is, happy to donate. Where would some of those funds be used for the Trust?
So when funds come to the Trussell Trust centrally, then what we're doing is we sort of act as a central coordinating body. So one of the challenges that food banks are finding is that there are lots of other government initiatives that are happening. So, for example, you've got councils in Wales, for example, are offering different types of support. And now our food banks are very small volunteer-led organisations, and they obviously don't have people who are sat able to speak directly to Welsh Government. So one of the things we're doing is we're giving advice to food banks about, okay, fine, here are the people that you need to concentrate on looking after, and here are the people that Welsh Government are looking after, for example. Then we're also giving advice on how best to start up a new delivery system which conforms to social distancing, for example. And also we help coordinate big national partners. So we've got a lot of really exciting national partners who've come on board to help us alongside yourselves. So we have, for example, British Gas. So they had literally hundreds of engineers with vans who have had all of their non-essential work stopped. So we've gotten in touch with each other, and we now have British Gas vans which are helping us to deliver food from depots where we're working with national supermarkets who are helping us out a little bit, and also to people's homes as well. So what we do essentially is we help support the food bank network through what is a very challenging time for them.
That's amazing. So, I mean, you're acting very entrepreneurial, aren't you, in coordinating, finding new ways. Your community centres have been brilliant for so many years, but you're having to deliver to homes, and you're just finding new ways to keep the service going, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, it's actually sort of when you're on the phone to food banks, and when you see what they're tweeting about and putting on their Facebook pages, their spirit is very much entrepreneurial and needs must, making ends meet. And I think, we in the central team have been really inspired by that and thinking, okay, look, if these guys are doing this during a global pandemic, how best can we help them to do it? And it's, I'm very, very proud and privileged to be able to represent those food banks. And we will always be striving our utmost to do them justice.
Well done indeed. For those that have never seen a collection box in a supermarket, where would they normally find the place to donate the food?
So hopefully near the checkouts. So what you need to remember is if you spot it on the way in, don't forget about it, so that when you're on your way out, you can chuck some stuff in there, because obviously you do need to pay for it before it goes into the box.
Yeah, it's no good just taking it off the shelf and putting it in.
I mean, I personally don't have a problem with that, but the supermarket might. So yes, do get the order correct.
Might be get it the right order. That's right. But that's the first thing is look at the list that we keep putting up, and things like UHT. You might not be finding that in the stores at the moment. So you could take it, as long as it's in date. You could take it from your cupboard at home, your pantry, could you not, Gary, and take it and actually put it. It doesn't have to be directly what you picked up that day. It might be that you've been listening to me going on and on and on about cutting down carbs, and you've got loads of pasta that you think, well, I'm just not going to cook that. Let me give the pasta over, or so on. So, or you're going to go and buy some tuna or some canned fish for yourself. We'll just put an extra one or two into the trolley, and then remember to take them out and put them in the box as you leave the supermarkets. And it's most supermarkets, isn't it?
Yeah, supermarkets have been great, actually. They've really kind of stepped up and rallied around, and are really helping us out a lot and helping out local food banks. And to talk about the list of foods, one of the things that we strive to do to the best of our ability is to ensure that the food packages that go out to people are as balanced and nutritionally balanced as they can be. We have constraints on us because we have to concentrate on non-perishable foods. But things like UHT milk, for example, isn't what people usually think about when they donate to a food bank. I think the classic food stuff that people think about is beans. Beans are appreciated, obviously, but actually a fair few food banks have got bean mountains. And right. People don't think about the things like the UHT milk, the tinned fish, the tinned meat, those foodstuffs which help us to make a more balanced parcel, as balanced as you could possibly manage with an emergency food parcel. So yeah, very grateful for you getting your viewers to think about what is most helpful for local food banks so we can make up those parcels.
That's brilliant advice, because you're absolutely right. I don't know why it is, but that would be the first thing I'd think of as well, a can of beans. I don't know why. And like you say, you might have shelves and shelves full of that at the moment, but you're obviously, you're trying to make a round meal, aren't you? You're trying to put a 3-day, it is 3-day supply you put in a box, isn't it? And of course you can't just go and put 100 cans of beans. So it's have a look at that list and see what you can spare from home or purchase when you're in the supermarket, especially the UHT milk. Gary, we think you're all doing an absolutely fabulous jobs at the Trussell Trust and all the food banks. I know there are others as well, some independents out there, but all of you are doing a fantastic job. And what I'd ask everybody that's going to do the clap for the brilliant NHS on Thursday, we should also be clapping for our food banks and all your volunteers as well. Thank you very much for all the work you do.
Pleasure. Thank you to you and your viewers as well. We're extremely grateful.
Thank you, Gary. Right, we'll speak to you soon, Gary. That was the brilliant Gary Lemon from the Trussell Trust, who are operating over 1,250 food banks now in the UK. We need your cash, whether that be £2, £5, £10, whatever you can donate, either by text or just giving, would be greatly appreciated. Let's try and make sure that people aren't going hungry in the UK this evening. Massive thank you to all for staying around. We know we had some technical difficulties at the beginning. Maybe it was a bit of a conspiracy. Maybe people were trying to shut us up. Who knows? Do spread the word by sharing at the bottom. Please do subscribe to our channel if you can. That would be fantastic. And do give us the thumbs up, because with more thumbs up we get, the more I think YouTube and other things will let people know that we're around. And if you do get a spare hour later on, I absolutely promise you, if you go down to the Fat and Furious podcast series, you'll see the latest one there with Shan Hussain. He speaks from the heart in more ways than one. Till tomorrow, stay safe. Join me at 10 o'clock every morning live on YouTube. Simply go to Primal Living's channel and you'll see our new food bank show. Now, the food bank show is basically what it says on the tin. We're trying to raise money for food banks across the UK that more than ever need our support. At the same time, in every show, I'll be joined by doctors and nutritionists that are going to help us reshape the food that we eat. Because maybe there's a bit of a silver lining for our health right now. All of the restaurants are shut. The McDonald's, the Subway, the Greggs, they're all closed. So we've got to change our eating habits anyway. But with the advice of the world's leading doctors, some of the world's leading nutritionists, I'm going to help you reshape the food that you're consuming and hopefully boost your immune system to get through this very difficult time.